Okay, thanks everyone for coming along. Particular thanks to Craig and Ads for agreeing to facilitate or be involved in this. They refused to say that they were leading it, so I won't say that. The intent is really to have a discussion on coaching C1 paddlers with a particular focus on coaches who are maybe new to taking paddlers into C1. The focus is on everyone bringing their own questions, challenges and ideas for everyone else to learn from. My intent is to only step in if I feel we're not making progress. So if I don't say anything for 90 minutes, that would be a sign that it's going really well. Some ground rules or principles, Craig said to me earlier today. No swearing or derogatory comments. It is being recorded. Be respectful to each other. Friendly teasing is okay if you know each other well, but try to build each other up rather than knock each other down. So try and use and rather than but, or even better if we can. We are all learners here. So don't think that Adam and Craig are here to try and enlighten you. They probably will. They also want to get better. So get engaged. Be selfish about your learning. Sam, this was your idea. You wanted some support around C1 coaching. So thanks for bringing that forward. And you've kind of created a really nice platform for that. So thank you. If you want to share questions or comments, either raise your hand or type in the chat pane. I'll happily unmute mics if people want to speak. I've got some questions as well. Engage. It'll be a very dull 90 minutes otherwise. When we're done, we're done. If we're done at 60 minutes, then we'll finish. If we're done after 90 minutes, then so be it. We'll just see where we go. Now, what I haven't told Adam and Craig is that to get them warmed up, I've got some quick fire questions for them. Ugh. So I'm going to give you a choice of one thing or the other, and you have to choose quickly. Obviously, whoever answers first most often wins. It's obviously a prize. Everything's a competition, right? They are very difficult questions. First one, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay, mix. Arctic or desert?
Arctic.
Arctic.
Okay. Staycation or abroad holiday?
Staycation.
Abroad holiday.
Oh, mansion in the suburbs or cabin in the mountains?
It's all good.
Mansion in the suburbs or cabin in the mountains?
Cabin in the mountains.
Oh, easy. Okay. Here's the contentious one. When you put cups in the cupboard, right side up or upside down?
Ooh.
Right side up, more efficient.
Yeah, I'd agree. Right side up.
Serious one now. Ale or lager?
Ale.
Lager.
Lager. Okay. Smile or game face? What's your normal?
Smile.
Smiles.
Okay. If this was Stuart Gary, this might be different. Pool swim or open water swim?
Sorry?
Pool swim or open water swim? You've got a choice. In the pool or open water, which would you choose?
Open water.
Yeah, open water.
Okay. Working alone or working in a team?
Working in a team.
Team.
Okay, I thought about that.
Not always.
Augsburg or Bratislava?
Oh, tricky.
Augsburg,
yeah.
Prague or Seo?
Seo.
Lee Valley or Nottingham?
Lee Valley.
Lee Valley. Sorry, Nottingham.
Last one. Canoe or kayak?
Canoe.
Oh, I knew I'd get him on this one.
Canoe.
Oh, he thought about it, didn't he? He gave that a lot of thought. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Hopefully you're a bit warmer now. So I'm just going to kick off with one question, and then we'll kind of see where this goes, really. So for somebody new to coaching C1, who may have some good experience coaching K1, I'm thinking like someone like Sam, what would you say are some of the main differences or things to think about when setting out coaching C1?
You want to start with this, Craig?
Yeah, you crack on, mate.
Me crack on. I mean, I'd just start with the craft itself. So obviously position, what you're using. So single blade, these, two paddle, two blades. So the environment's quite different. They're involved with. I'd say setting that up so they're comfortable to progress is probably key to unlocking everything else as it goes along. Let's see.
Yeah. Go on. Repeat the exact nature of the question, Doug. Sorry.
So for somebody new to coaching C1,
yeah,
who may have good experience of coaching K1,
yeah,
what would you say are some of the main differences or things to think about when they set out coaching C1?
Okay, cool. Fittings. Yeah, pain, complexity of fittings. I think it's a different feel in the boat and different possibilities afforded to you. Probably not a different set of tactical options available at different times, I would say. Not that there's more or less, or fewer, sorry, but yeah, different ones at different times in different circumstances. And yeah, you can do the nature of the craft and where the body weight is in the craft, as Adam called it, I think, yeah, lends to different circumstances better than others compared to the kayak itself.
Yeah, so I'm interested.
A lot of people will tell you it requires a certain personality to paddle canoe. I'm not one of those people. I've met very interesting individuals who, yes, sit in both crafts.
So that's kind of interesting. The question I was going to ask is, what challenges do you guys find with coaching C1? Not necessarily opposed to coaching K1, but do you find some of the big challenges with that craft?
Please go first. Go on, I'll go. I wouldn't really say like me personally, I don't feel like I get challenged when I coach two different classes. So I think if someone's someone that's doubling up, I think, yeah, they're creative enough to experiment with being in both classes, that they're very, eager to learn and very infused, I think, by the different environments, or, calling them K1 and C1. So I think, yeah, to me, like, I can't really see any challenges. From a coach to coach them, I'd be kind of looking at like doing the same thing for both, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think you should, separate both of them as two different things, if you know what I mean. I think like Craig will allude to this probably a bit more of what he's done with his guys at top end. But for me personally, I treat them fairly similar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely see a huge amount of overlap, same as Adam. I've been on a journey, so I was very much not what you would call a canoe coach until the last 5 years or so. I don't really believe in labeling people as a canoe and kayak coach, by the way, so let's delete that already. It's just coaching or supporting people on a journey. I don't really believe in challenges because I think everything helps us grow. I guess one thing I'm mindful of in canoe is depending upon the skill level the person in front of you has, translating that into decisions made within the planning phase of the run is a really interesting part of canoe coaching, particularly if you have paddlers who are very skillful, who can paddle on both sides or on all four sides, as it may be, including crossbow. The more affordance you have of skill, the more decisions you have to make, and that can cognitively cause overload. So I think that's a really interesting thing that I've learned in the last few years regarding coaching canoe that stands out to me.
You've just used a lovely, very, very, very technical term in the coaching jargon. I wonder if we could just pull on that thread a little bit. You talked about it creates more, you perceive that C1 creates more affordances paddlers to think about. I wonder if you could just unpack that a little bit for people who might not be familiar with that term and kind of what you mean by that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the phrase affordance, as I use it and I understand it, is something available to you in a context. So that could be a physical affordance in that I have excellent power to weight and therefore it's quite easy for me to jump a stopper, for example. It could be an environmental one in that I have access to paddle on Grand Tully every day, therefore I'm afforded the opportunity to learn natural river skills. And equally it can take the form of a skills-based or environment-based one. And the opposite would be that you hear me use today would be a constraint, so something that takes away or can affect what's available in the situation. Regarding canoe, so I guess I'm talking about there, I don't know whether everyone can picture this, but so this, I used a presentation on this, I'm going to transform you to Adam's Choice over Prague, to Augsburg, Bottom Bridge. you've got the stopper, the S stopper under the bridge. Hopefully most people know that, but basically you have access to the left and right of this stopper, and you can exit and enter the feature from either side. When you've got a free lead in a situation like that, and you've got a high level of skill in any boat, there are a number of options. So the more skills you have, the more affordances are available, and the complexity of the decision making is arguably more difficult, if not well practiced. So if you picture a top end C1 woman approaching that from a free approach, you've got almost an infinite number. You've not only got the skills available, as in bow rudder upstream, the back blade upstream, you've got onside, offside switch, when do you switch, crossbow, no crossbow, all of these things, which yeah, has been a massive learning for me, I guess. So on the one hand, you're always looking to be highly skilled, but you need to be mindful that that can create cognitive overload. So you have to manage it in terms of what it means for the race as well.
Thanks, Craig. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think Craig nailed that, if I'm honest.
He did. So what I'm rattling in my head, I'm really interested to hear from other people, and I'm happy to unmute mics at this point for people. What I'm really wondering is,
Craig.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let somebody else ask a question, which was, with that in mind, how do you keep cognitive overload low on race day?
Cool. Do you want me to go, Adam, to start? I'll maybe go. I probably should have prefaced the whole conversation in that anything I talk about today is just my own sort of what I've come to learn as a coach and the mistakes I've made. In the last 3 years, I've become massively aware of what I don't know, more so than ever. And I'm pretty excited to be vulnerable in that space. So happy to be challenged and aware that I work in a very niche environment at the moment. So looking to learn from others in the call and be challenged by that. In answer to the question, which I think popped up, was how do you manage cognitive overload on race day? Two clinical factors for me, and they're umbrellaed by communication. One would be knowledge of yourself as the coach, and one would be knowledge of the person in front of you. I did a webinar this week on coach-athlete relationship. I think our biggest, and supported by a psych in prep for this that I work with, one of our biggest jobs as coaches is to encourage the connection to self with learners. And I think how I reduce cognitive overload hopefully will have occurred pre-race in the work we've done to that point. And yeah, if it needs to be managed in a race, then it shows there's more ground to cover. However, it is regularly needing to be managed in a race. But I would hope that the person in front of me has the I guess, confidence and comfort in a relationship to ask for help, or to suggest and be aware that they are suffering a cognitive overload at that point. And we'll obviously have a great opportunity to spend a lot of time. I see the athletes more than I see my children. So, you know, there's a lot of permissions given from them to me to interact around the decision-making process and what my role is within that. So I guess that's all very well prepared and planned, which might be very different if I'm working with 15, 10-year-olds. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, that was the thread I wanted to pull on, really. Before I was over to Adam now, I suppose you've worked with a lot of younger athletes, and that kind of cognitive overload, getting a bit stressed or whatever they're going. How do you manage that when you're working with younger ones? It's not really a C1 question anymore, it's a general
question. I think, I mean, given the nature that you probably at the development level haven't had as much time, to fully, click massively with everyone, I mean, on the level probably Craig has with his athletes. I think I wouldn't say you need to lead on, you don't lead on that, but I'd say that you need to inspire them to think confidently about the actions they're going to take, if that makes sense. So I think, to give an example, stopper moves on the Legacy, for example, in Lee Valley, it often comes up about, what side should I approach, going down this drop, for instance, leading into an up, and how I think you get them to the athletes to process that decision making themselves without you basically making that decision for them. I think then leads to further down the line, that strong understanding of what they can and can't do, or what they maybe need to improve on or understand a bit more. So I think having, from the way I coach would be very much, empowering and inspiring, confidence on them, and kind of pressing that on them. So I think, having a good verbal and understanding of their emotion, verbal communication with the athletes, just to understand the need of what they're going through, if that makes sense. I think definitely talent. You're going to have to talk a lot, I'd say, more to get the answers, I guess, they're maybe looking for, as well as you, is where I'd approach it.
You've offered me an affordance there, which is you've offered me a little segue, because we've moved into this lovely space, but I'm conscious that we were going to talk about C1 stuff, and I noticed that you talked about decisions on stop and moves and so on.
Yeah.
One of the most asked questions before this call was about switching.
Yeah.
And obviously we're talking about decisions and who's driving that decision. Is it them driving? And obviously if they're new to C1, you might have to hold their hand a bit more and say, I'm going to suggest you don't do it that way, because it's probably not going to go very well for you. So I guess just interested to get you guys' thoughts on switching. Where if you're coaching a new C1 paddler, would you promote paddling on both sides to start with, or would you say get really good on one side and getting better on their crossbow and so on? Or is it better to do both at the same time? I don't really know. I'm interested, because that was a question that was asked a lot. What you guys have, if you guys have a view on it.
I think, I don't know, the way I see it is, I'd just let them at it type thing. I mean, the way we approach it in Lee Valley is very much like, here's your boat, here's your paddle, off you go. And then you just kind of see what the kids come up with. I think, you can definitely demonstrate, either by leading in a boat maybe, and showing good examples of how strokes look like, or propel you well. Everyone develops very naturally, I'd say, and I think I'd promote that more than, oh, that's wrong, do it this way, if that makes sense. And I think the same with switching. When they start, it's very easy for them maybe to stay on an onside stroke, so switching left to right and maybe to stay in a straight line. But I think when they to experiment with using crossbows, there's not really a right and wrong way of approaching that decision. So I think switching is such a random, weird subject, I guess, and it's Craig are probably go on about this for a long time, because he's had a bit,
such compassion,
longer.
Mate.
But I think should you promote switching? I think you should never limit someone's options when they're learning. So I think yes, I'd definitely encourage experimentation in both a crossbow sense and a switching sense. And I think, alluding back to when you used to switch, say, on a crossbow, I think it's quite healthy to let chaos kind of happen a little bit. So I think experience vs maybe caution, depending on your environment. Obviously, you don't want to be doing it going down a huge waterfall possibly for the first time ever. But I think if your environment's right, there's no reason why you shouldn't experiment with things.
Thanks, Adam. So there's a sort of second question that was asked that is probably more appropriate for Craig to answer. So I'm going to ask it. Came from Stuart, so of course it's a bloody difficult question. Do you see switching as being like a rising force or a kind of advantage, Craig, or do non-switchers still remain better? And then do you have a view on, is it only an advantage for juniors, women before strength is developed and so on? Do you have a feeling on that? Top level down, I guess, rather than bottom level up?
I'll start with a provocative question and then I'll loop back and kind of build on Adam's point, if that's okay. So I guess the question I have in my head is who wouldn't want to be as skilled as possible? This is kind of where I kind of question myself on. I really like Adam's point on be steered by them. I did a presentation on switching 2 years ago and I changed the title straight away to be whose side are you on? And I never answer the question because I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. What I have come to learn is that personally, I shape my environment backwards with the end in mind. So about 2 years ago, and yes, embarrassingly only 2 years ago, I sat down and asked myself truly the question of what canoe slalom is. Like, what is it? What challenges do athletes face on the race run, during the race run, in that preparation phase around the race run? And some of the key things I came up with, that, you know, it's a lot about decision making, it's a lot about adaptability, but bottom line is about getting from A to B as quickly and cleanly as possible under the current rules. So how do I know what is quick or not? There might be stuff out there, you know, there's new techniques come on board, be that a fakie, I know that's a question today, or a fix back in the day. There'll be more. There's probably some being designed in a loft conversion or a garden right now by these creative souls out there. But yeah, give them the choice. So we're after adaptable decision makers. You don't want them, personally, I don't think you want them technically thinking on the run. You want them living the run. I think when Adam talks about being steered by them, I think it's really important to understand before you attempt to be understood as a coach. I'm a very firm believer that the sport is theirs and not ours, and therefore they should guide and learn, and we should steer and support and challenge when the time's right, but you've got to know who you're challenging before you challenge. Bringing that back to switching, I can pull a slide up in a minute, maybe, Doug. I know I shared it with you beforehand. I guess it's really important to consider people's backgrounds. Like, a friend of mine uses a really good phrase that although they get off the bus stop at the same place when they arrive at you, they all get on at a different stop. And, you know, if you bring that back to switching, there will be influences on people. You know, Pete Bell was switching when I was, you know, about, I don't know, 8 years old, needing a leg up over the bridge at Town Falls. It's not new by any means, because I'm quite old now. So it's not new, it's just gone in waves of traditions, and maybe people have just been blinded by tradition and done what's normal. And maybe people thinking outside the box again, whether that was the rise of C1 women maybe that shaped that, and you see a lot of men doing it again now. Maybe it's reshaping thinking a little bit. But where I get at when I talk about where they arrived from, or maybe, if you'll allow me, Doug, just pull up one slide. Bear with me 1 second. I'm a bit new to all this. That's the wrong PowerPoint, so bear with me a second. You guys see that okay?
Yeah, I can see that.
Let me just pull it all up. So this is something I pulled together in 2018 about, and I realize if you've, you know, I'm working with a small number of athletes, but I think all these things really come into consideration for me when I'm thinking about any skills practice. Switching would come under that, but it would just be one factor in terms of, you know, what's important now to work on. So the philosophy of the athlete, how they arrive at you, they might have been heavily influenced by purists, as I call them, that, you know, think or have established this mentality, rightly or wrongly, that switching is a weakness and not a skill. I can tell you it is a skill, having been taught how to coach it by the paddlers themselves. What training environment do they have available? Like Adam said, you know, you might be comfortable working a 7-year-old's offside in Aberfeldy, but you might not be comfortable doing that on the Legacy Channel or on Kingston or on Tully and Spate. It might not be the right thing or what's most important now. I was reminded, I told Doug I'd get this in. I watched Frozen 2 on Sunday afternoon, and they had some big decisions to make at the end of that movie as to, you know, you make one decision now and it will have a really big negative consequence thereafter, but they focus on making the right decision now, and then you adapt to the next one as quick as you can and try and solve that one before it has a negative consequence. I'm reminded of that when you talk about skill development. You know, you've got to be confident in what you're doing as a coach. I think really encourage understanding the discipline is key. Like, I was extremely aware I didn't understand the canoe discipline when I started coaching canoe, and I've just tried to bury myself in it, and it's been amazing. And the reason I'll probably say canoe in the answer to the canoe kayak is just that I've learned so much from Canoe in the last 5 years. It's just been incredible, and it's really challenged my coaching in a positive manner. So yeah, I mean, all sorts of things. And I think as you build a relationship, your job as the coach, like Adam says, is maybe not, I personally don't see my job to say, right, when you're in this group, you switch. It's to kind of get an agreed purpose to what you're there to do, or what that individual, their why, I guess, and the end in mind, and work backwards and kind of shape the environment over time that gives them an insight into different ways of paddling, different self-organization solutions to problems, and provide a reflectional tool with them that enables them to make the decision thereafter. And try and have an open dialogue with it. You know, do you know why people come into you and don't switch? You know, if you give someone a paddle, why don't they throw it over the deck? I believe the ancient Indians used to do it. I believe they were switchers, so I'm led to believe. I don't have evidence for that. But yeah, just really knowing that person and then having a conversation with them. It might be that they're scared to. I've witnessed that, you know, it come across as pure, but actually they felt embarrassed that they wouldn't be good enough on that side. So in looping that back to Adam's point, where you provide them the opportunity to try many things in many ways, and going back to the cognitive overload point on race day, the purpose of that race needs to be put in clarity between the two of you or the group, because the resulting cognitive overload might be perfect for what you're there to do. It might be an excellent learning tool for the long term. So how you respond to someone you give the power of decision making to is really important. You know, it's so easy to give someone pay lip service to empowerment of decision making, and then if it costs them the race, to then kind of take away that empowerment in one comment. And that's the power we have. We need to be mindful of. I can touch on that slide in detail, but you can all read. If anyone's got a question, I saw one pop up, but I haven't read it.
So there's a couple of questions. I'm going to, again, slightly segue. There was a section around equipment, and that kind of seems kind of very relevant. You've got biomechanics and so on there. I just found Jock's question was about paddle length. And then Maddie's just asked a really nice question, actually, which is around how length of paddle might influence whether you switch or not. And I'm just wondering, we had some questions come in before the call, just around some of the kind of technical stuff around setting up boats and paddles and making it safe and effective for everyone involved. I come from a completely different sport that involves something resembling a paddle, and I've discovered that if the length of it, if it's too big, if there's too much load on it, you create really bad biomechanics. You overload athletes and they don't develop the skill properly. I guess I'm just really interested, and I think that's probably where these guys are coming from as well. How do these things affect the way you might coach it, their experience of the sport, their enjoyment of it, and their progression and so on? Just very happy for you guys to take that wherever you want to take it.
I mean, paddling is such a, you can go on for ages about this. And I think there's pros and cons for long v short. I think, like, it's a very personal thing. You know, apart from your boat, it's this, you know, the second kind of part of your canoeing, you know what I mean, if that makes sense, like, or a part of your body when you're canoeing, in a way. You're linked to that feel in the water. So I think, yeah, having a very long paddle gives you advantages in, you know, how far you can reach, you know, potentially how long that stroke is in. So it can have an effect on cadence. Yeah, it could make it harder to switch, you know, if you are going to take it out of the water, you know, to left or right. But you could argue that putting it in a, you know, a long blade in a crossbow, it's going to be very hard to lift out if it's super long. There's so many things, I guess, you can go into with that. I think, again, it's such a personal thing. It would be very hard to give a definite answer. Shorter blades, you know, are probably easier to handle, I'd say. But you've got the disadvantages of, you know, everything that you get over having a longer paddle, I think. So I don't know if Craig's probably had a bit more experience. We're probably the ones he works with setting equipment up. You know, so I can think of two definite ones that spend a lot of time thinking about equipment. So yeah, you probably elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I get the main advice I would give, or the main experience. I mean, I hate the side of equipment. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, it's big energy cost to me. So where possible, I can station people better positioned to help me out, and the better. The one thing I would comment on, I think we've got a lot better as a sport in the last 10 years at matching equipment size to maturation through the pathway. And I think that is, in terms of the way I biomechanically see canoe slalom and the evolution of skills and safe evolution of skills of protecting your body to the forces they're exposed to. I know we've got a freestyle paddler on the call as well. It's probably prevalent for that, I imagine. You know, you look at the Jackson kayaks, things like that. They probably pioneered this space more than we did, for sure. I just think it's crucial. I think people will always paddle in their own way for their own body, and probably a product of the environment that they learned to paddle in. That's normal. However, I think we can make their bodies, I guess you're looking for your equipment to be an extension of the body. That's how I see our sport, and that everything is in tune. So the better matched it is to bring the best out of your body at your maturation rate, the better. The challenge is it's expensive, of course. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions just firing there. I'm going to unmute Bruce in a second, our freestyle. He's got something to say about equipment and maturation. Jock's asked a not unrelated question around switching again, about switching to bring in different muscle groups as you tire towards the end of the course. Is that also an equipment factor as well?
Do you want me to go, Ads?
Oh, go on. You're right.
It's a good question, Jock. I think, yeah, I think again, it depends on what that particular training session, that practice, or that race is about. Like, you know, there is definitely, as you saw on my skill development wheel, or whatever you would call it there, like the physicality and the biomechanics are an important factor at any one point to take into consideration. You know, if that race is important to unlock certain opportunities, whilst taking long-term skill development into mind, you may choose to make a short-term decision. Although that doesn't necessarily align to my coaching principles or philosophy longer term, I have definitely done that. And I would, you know, there is a time and a place that is right. And I think as they're maturing, you know, sport is prevalent for shoulder injuries and back injuries and rib injuries. I think there is an argument from the physical side to develop across all strokes. I would talk from personal experience, and it's not a green light to do it or not do it, because it is very individual, that the crossbar does seem to be the most physically loaded stroke that I witness in slalom. Yeah. So it's something to be mindful of when you're dealing with people going through adolescence, for sure.
It's interesting, I think, because, you know, it is definitely probably the most demanding stroke you do, and in slalom, canoe even. But it's all obviously, yeah, it's definitely probably the most powerful stroke. And I think if you can shift, you know, if you can shift the boat using that side of the, you know, and that technique, I don't think we should shy away from it too much. This is probably my purist coming out a little bit, Craig. And I think you're looking at the individual and how, you know, fit, how strong, you know, how physically set up they are to you know, comply with the requirements, I guess, for doing that over a whole run. I think, you know, Craig's touched on a big point about, you know, definitely development, you know, as a young person's coming through, yeah, having your shoulder in that position, it definitely opens the door up for injury if it's done at the wrong, you know, done wrongly, I'd say, or they get in a situation where, you know, that, you know, injury does happen. I think canoeing is obviously an extreme sport in a way, so you're always kind of looking for, you know, the safest way to teach people things. So yeah, it's tricky, I think. I'd never say that, again, you know, alluding to like Fabian's run, I don't know if, you know, you were going to talk about this, Craig, like when he won switching, you know, he switched halfway down the Worlds in 2015. and one, he was one of the first persons that done that. And I think out of his interview, it came out after that was a fatigue thing, and he kind of said that he was going to struggle to hold his run together, being a righty. I think he started on and then finished as a lefty. But again, he made that decision knowing his own physical capacity to deliver during the run. So I think, you're looking for a coach, again, understanding your athlete and your athlete understanding themselves to allow you to kind of figure them questions out. I think. I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah. So we just had a flurry of questions coming in. So I'm going to do some things here. We will answer all the questions, everyone. This cross-bow maturation thing is sparking a lot of thoughts. Sam's also got a different question, which we'll get to in a minute. I would really like to unmute Bruce Jolla for a second, if that's okay. He's got a comment, I think, about equipment and maturation from a freestyle point of view. Is that okay, guys, if I just let him in and see what he wants to add?
Yeah.
Bruce, you're on.
No pressure. So it wasn't even so much a question, it was more of an acknowledgement of what Craig was saying as well, and especially when he brought in the Jacksons, who really changed the game in freestyle by designing kit around little people.
Yeah.
Because until that point in time, I guess what we had was a situation where younger paddlers really wanted to engage with freestyle, but then gained a lot of bad habits, basically, by trying to use equipment that was too powerful for them, or overpowering, using a paddle, a blade that's way too big to try and make a boat that's too big do something that's just not appropriate for that size of person. But those habits then stay with them as they develop, and then you end up in a position where actually you've got a really dynamic, explosive sport which puts massive demands on the body, which is shortening effectively the career, if you like, or even the participative career of that paddler. And you've only got to look as far as Eric Jackson himself to see what happens when you actually use the right kit in the right way over a long time, because that guy was winning world championships in his 40s. Now, okay, it's a smaller sport, but now we've got a situation where we've got younger paddlers coming through in smaller boats and with smaller bladed paddles and performing all the tricks in K1, for example. And then as soon as they move into C1, and this is where it comes back into your conversation around switching, because they've come purely from that freestyle background, or from a sort of a general paddling freestyle background, they have no cultural baggage as well. And they're very happy to perform tricks on both sides, because switching a paddle for them it's not even a decision. It's just let's change the paddle and go. So they can double their score sheet, where a lot of the older C1 paddlers really couldn't, because for them there was a cognitive barrier in swapping from one side to the other. So they would try and find a novel technique to get a trick on the other side, and all they had to do was swap hands. And that's been really, really prevalent last few years. So Tom Dolé is the young French kid who basically performed amazingly at the last World Championships, and we've got some of the GB team now coming through. For them, switching's really, really happy. And it's interesting, these have all been paddlers who have grown up with kit that's the appropriate size for them the whole way, and the level of confidence is totally matched to the control they have of their craft, and it just gives them control of their mind on competition day, your race day, which means for a coach actually working with people who do K1 and C1, then C1 questions are actually kind of a bit of a moot point that way, because they've got the solutions to all the problems, and all we're doing is, as Craig said before, making sure we give them the right support and offer a challenge when we know them well enough to do that at the time. So yeah, it was a big agreement, not so much a question, but just an absolute yes. It's very important.
Fantastic, Bruce. Thank you so much. I knew there was some gold coming from you. That's why I needed to bring you in. If I just bring this back to the discussion we were having, that was really helpful, Bruce. And I can see Craig and Adam doing some real thinking there, whoever else was. A couple of questions that came in related to this, and it's kind of that maturation point. So Maddie's asked, would it be better for the paddler to reach a level of maturation before developing the crossbow, or does it grow with the paddler? And then John's asked a slightly provocative question of, is the crossbow a macho stroke? I'm wondering, based on what Bruce has just said and the conversation we're having about equipment size and stuff, well, what do people think of
haven't
that?
heard that word for a while.
Yeah.
I'll try and address Maddie's afford me the opportunity to loop around a bit, Maddie. I'm just kind of sat here going, there's a huge amount of research out there about the non-specialization of children or young people in sport and the value that has long term. I guess if we were actually to break down a canoe discipline into many components of skill, I think it applies there, in terms of, like Adam says, let them guide you, be steered, give them exposure to all possibilities, all environments, and allow them to specialize at their own time long term if they want to. And then they might unspecialize, by the way, as well. And where the crossbar fits into that, it's a bit like, you wouldn't give kids math 10 hours every day, would you? It'd be a bit of a cognitive overload. I guess in terms of the crossbar, that might be exactly the same, might be a physical overload that would inhibit further learning in other areas. I think there's an element that's true to your comment, Maddie, in terms of on an individual level, it may be best to introduce it. I would say it's best to introduce it at the right time, given your knowledge of the individual. And it might not be just your knowledge of the individual, but you might need to know a little bit more about their physical capacity. I realize we have the opportunity of physios and stuff like that, and not everyone will, but I think it's important if you understand your discipline well enough and you're able to take time to observe a paddler in front of you on specific waters, you'll get a sense of the load on the body, I would suggest. And if you don't know, ask and get a co-coach in and go on a journey together.
That's cool.
Do you want to add into that, or are you?
No, I'm thinking, and I'm
Good,
probably going to
thinking
go
out loud,
because it was just one of these things about. I was just reflecting there a little bit on. There's a little kid I coach in Lee Valley, and Jock's actually he's observed this guy as well, and he has a very, very good crossbow, but. And he's 11 years old. He's probably, I don't know, 3.5 foot. Probably, I don't know how tall that is really, but a lot of the time you see him go into something and you spend absolutely ages trying to get up for a gate, and you just think, just switch, and it'll be really easy, and like everything you're struggling with right now will be solved, type thing. But I think the perseverance of him and his dedication to try and get, he really admires Aaron Burgess, for example, and he's shaping that stroke. So I think when he does hit, maturity and he grows and he gets stronger, he's going to be very, capable on that side. And I think, it's just interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I feel we're weaving away from maybe like, do we prescribe something, rather than experience? I don't know. Sorry, I was just thinking about that example there a little bit. Sorry.
That's good. I'm thinking out loud. This is kind of what these sessions are for, that you don't have to have perfect answers. The idea is we're making sense together. So,
I guess the bottom line is, in a more direct way to answer Maddie's question, I would be looking to shape an environment that allowed them to safely explore all possibilities of skill.
Yeah.
At the right time for the right person in the right place. That's probably most a concise answer I can give you.
Yeah. I'm interested, guys, while we're in this space, kind of a really common thing that coaches chat to me down at sort of pathway or club level, just around managing injuries. And you've kind of chatted, I think, a bit about how you manage that. I don't know what the stats are around prevalence of injuries. In my head, there's more injuries in C1 than in K1. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm interested in what strategies you guys have maybe put in place over the years to try and manage those injuries in C1 specifically.
I'm being quite lucky, actually. I've never really had anyone with injuries, related from canoeing so far. So touch wood. So I think, to obviously environment setting, risk assessing, where you're operating and what you're expecting the athletes to do, I think's quite prevalent with that. I don't think you should be, pushing safety for, the goal of achieving something, that's beyond someone. I'd actually probably say, I don't know, I'm just picking this off my head. I feel like K1s have more injuries than C1s, I'd say, in recent years, and from a GB point of view, I'd say. But yeah, don't know. I'll leave Craig to give his thoughts.
Stats.
See you shaking his head there.
No, I don't have the stats, so I can only answer what I have done or what I would consider. I think I'll speak for the sort of level that I work at, and then maybe offer some thoughts below. But happy to bounce that around. I mean below, just as in a younger age of development. I think understanding the individual is really key, and learning from every little niggle, every little injury, every little hour of missed training, every missed run, every adaptation is a constant part of my week with everyone I work with. And obviously we have a team around us that can hold each other to account and monitor that together, which is really fortunate. A lot of support and challenge around that. And really involving the athlete, empowering them to lead that process so they start to understand what's right for them. You know, we live down here with 21 athletes full-time, I think it is, and it's quite right that every 21 of them should have a different approach to training. I think I've definitely witnessed errors in the past where we have tried to chase the successful athlete and their way of training, and we've probably put some people into some quite dangerous situations of load management and cognitive. Well, doesn't bear thinking about. And I've probably been guilty of not seeing that more quickly. I think we're a lot better informed now about the individual, which is really exciting. So the dosing has to be correct. So, you know, we're really mindful when people move to the Performance Centre in London that it's a complete different water experience. The load on different limbs is different. How it's more sort of holding strokes than it is generation of speed, more force related, arguably. So the dosing is really key. And I think that's the same when you look. Like, I wouldn't advocate a young paddler being in a canoe for every session. I wouldn't advocate them being in a slalom boat for every session either. It comes back to what our role is to a degree. You know, I'm going to fuel Adam's biases here. Are we developing people and paddlers in a non-specialist manner to then specialise as they see fit across the disciplines, hopefully within canoe? Or are we looking to specialise to hit a KPI along the way? And I think that's the challenge we have with funded programs, is trying to find that right balance at the right time. But the dosing is really key. You know, we've got people in our program who could canoe all day and be absolutely fine for 25 years. And we've got people who have performed to the same level as those individuals who can probably only do 5 whitewater sessions a week. How you get that information is probably the key thing.
I'm now torn as to whether we dive into that. What things you do? I'm reminded of an incident. I ran a conference many years ago, and I was working for a governing body, and one of our performance centre coaches was doing a session about different things, and he talked about how he adapted training sessions, and one of our club coaches asked him how he managed load and how do you decide whether to change that set or do this or do that, and they're expecting him to say something really clever like, oh, HRV, or we've got some cool app or something, and he just said, oh, just look at them. And there was this like jaw hit the floor in the room. They were like, what do you mean? You're supposed to be a high performance coach. What do you mean just look at your athletes? I was like, well, I'm very fortunate, kind of as Craig points out, that I see my athletes every day. I just kind of have a look at them and I go, look a bit tight, or there's a different stimulus or something's going on here and I can't put my finger on it. But just because I can't put it on a graph doesn't mean it's not important. And yeah, just really interesting. Now, John's getting all excited. I wonder if I just bring John in.
Can I just add to that, Doug, while you bring John in? I think it's the same applies for skills, I think. Like, yeah, from what bus stop are they getting off when they arrive with you today? And, you know, if you're going to, it's like Adam said, if you're going to suggest an upstream blade session on the bottom drop, you know, you probably need to know who's arriving at you for that session, because you might need to change that. If that's if you want to have that much sort of level of planning in your session design, or at least that's the area you're going to work at, you need to know that the person is in the right place to come and operate in that space today. Otherwise, you need to flex. And the challenge is when you've got various people in a group, I guess. And that's the skill of coaching, I guess, being able to navigate individual needs within a group context, for sure.
John, I have unmuted you. I'm itching to hear what you want to say on this, because I know you've got a really strong feeling on this.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't want to take too much time. There's quality chat going on here, but just that whole notion is really encouraging to hear, not searching for a holy grail to solve those issues that bypasses talking to the human that's arriving in front of you. I was just going to share that I had Alex Nikonov was my coach for a long time in sprint, and you couldn't come across a coach that has a bigger scientific background. He was the leader of a kind of research team in biomechanics. He's been through everything, looked at everything, and when offered any of these highly technical solutions that would be online or would be some kind of testing, so I'll just use my eyes. And actually, when you think about it, what is it that's using its eyes? Well, as a coach, as a human being, there aren't very many more kind of sophisticated things out there. You're using everything that you've learned when you're looking at that athlete and talking to them. So that is data. It's not data that fits into a spreadsheet, but looking at someone, talking to them, it's data. You know who's turned up for that session. So it's less extreme in my world in sprint, but there might be a sprint session that's going to happen 50 meters, and you can tell, you can look in Liam's eyes and he's out. It's not going to happen. You're going to get 150-meter effort, and then it's going to be canned anyway. Or you can change what the session is and get a whole session of something else out of them. And then over the course of that week and that season, you've maximised what the athlete does massively.
I knew there's some good stuff coming. I was desperate to unmute him there. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this? We've kind of gone off piece a little bit, but I'm really pleased about that. This kind of relying on data that we might not be able to touch. So coach developers have a really poncy term for this, just somatic data, which is like, what does it feel like? But it's just as important, and I rely on that as much as I rely on cognitive data or observational data or analysis or whatever, because it's really important. What did it feel like? Because sometimes you can get you can get a picture of a session. That's what happened today. Yeah, but I didn't feel that. I felt something else was going on here, or it was actually about something completely different.
I think what we got to be careful in slalom, Doug, as well, like that I've witnessed is, and this period of time has really brought some education on this. There's a lot of compromise in setting a slalom program. So a lot of it is about power to weight, repeat force or repeat power across the disciplines. There's a lot of land work goes in, as well as a lot of water work. I'm yet to meet a paddler who is overly willing to separate the two for a long period of time. And therefore the volume of loads you come across can be quite counterproductive and quite high pretty quick and hard to keep a tab on. I think what we're learning now from this period is you take the temptation away from the coach and the paddler to keep paddling. You'll probably get a lot of strong adaptations going on through this period, because they're probably resting and recovering to a much more clinical and healthy manner than they may do if you're still trying to chase two things at once.
Yeah. So I'm going to use that as an opportunity to move into something that somebody asked. I feel we've been skirting around a little bit, which is we've talked a lot about people being individuals and not trying to put people in boxes too much. So one of the questions was about the differences of coaching men and women, differences in terms of style, in terms of load and so on. Now, Craig, I know you've done a whole bunch of work specifically on female physiology, and I know Maddie's interested in this because she's interested in strength and conditioning and sports science and so on, is also our only female coach paddler on the call. I'm just wondering if you guys have got any observations or comments or thoughts on, particularly in terms of the C1 case, the acute C1 class, what kind of things do you think about in terms of differences between men and women? Maybe it's generalizations or maybe it's more specifics.
Do you want me to go, Adam?
You go first, I'll finish.
I'm going to read your body language there, mate. I'll be openly vulnerable here, Doug. So how long have I been coaching? So I guess my coaching career, I've predominantly coached females. I would say, not exclusively, but predominantly. It'd be heavily weighted in that sort of direction. Probably about 8 years ago, I probably thought I could have wrote a book on the differences of coaching the different genders, or certainly on the specifics of coaching females. I'm really glad I didn't commit to that, and I wasn't organised enough, because I would heavily regret it now. Probably be burning all copies and asking for amnesty. I think and there's a few pivotal moments that are probably another session that we could have that made me shift my mentality on this. But I mean, a line I use is that I've never met a human clone, and I rarely, if ever, have met the same version of myself twice. You know, I think everybody's an individual. There may be some patterns, there may be some things to be mindful of, and that you need to be more knowledgeable in different areas. You need to be very across different physiologies, menstrual cycles, things like that over time. I guess it just comes under the bracket of understanding the person in front of you for me. Because for every pattern I've seen, there will be people I know would be an exception. And that's both on the male and female side. So, you know, I'm aware of the stereotypes that are out there, but I could position male athletes I've coached more towards that female stereotype, and I could position female people I've coached more towards the male stereotype. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't know. All that I know works is coaching the individual, with the exception of, working backwards with the end in mind. So start with the race. What does the race mean? Bring that back to the individual. What are they asked to do? What affordances and constraints do they currently have? What environment do we have to work in? And working back through that with individuals. So obviously when you're working with females, the menstrual cycle comes into consideration under that for sure. Something I've tried to educate myself on with support on, you know, and look for more evidence out there in what is a tricky area to evidence, because it's very individual. But there's some good stuff out there. It's probably another session, that one, I suspect.
Craig, could you just briefly just chat a bit about what you've done with Georgie Brunvels from Oracle around that?
Yeah, I can.
Just because people might not know what you've been doing in that area.
Probably got to be a little bit careful for permissions.
Okay.
But yeah, I was put in touch with Georgie Brunvels, who is, I'm going to be embarrassed here. I don't think I know her full title.
She's a research scientist.
She's a research scientist with a heavy level of expertise and interest in research and practice in female physiology. She works with a lot of sports, including football, US Olympic teams, on female physiology and menstrual cycles. It's an area I was looking to get into a little bit more, to have more knowledge, see the applications for training. I work with 2 females, so I've got the time available to potentially tailor training as well. So without going into the detail of what we do, I guess we've opened up a really honest conversation, and that is just, in our world now, it's a normal conversation about it, as switching would be, as decision making would be, as how are you sleeping, how's your nutrition. It's just part of the mix in terms of a facet of performance.
Thanks, Craig. I guess I was just conscious that we'd had a discussion about lots of intangibles. There are some tangibles, so there is an app available that I know you guys use and other people have used, and just something coaches might not be aware of. If you want to know more about it, then we can chat about it later. Adam, I'm interested in your thoughts. I guess you've coached younger paddlers in terms of developing skills and developing physiology and so on. Any thoughts?
I mean, I just echo Craig a lot on stuff. I think, you know, I don't really coach differently between boys and girls, because you're still reading the person first. I think having some level of emotional understanding and always approaching, you know, them, I think, very openly and not closed off on maybe how you're, you know, processing them, I think. So you can never really tell, I guess, like, until that level of trust and understanding is there with an athlete, you know, until they give you that permission to be part of that with them, I think, to really know, you know what I mean, like how to unlock, you know, how
travel that journey with them. Yeah, I think again, really agree with Craig. It's kind of, you tackle it day to day, I think, and I think there's not just being open and very observant about how they are, what I mean, in that present, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, great guys. Kind of been circling around to this for a little while. I sort of sense we're moving towards the final section of our course here today to some extent. Sam asked a question a while ago, and it kind of brings us back to where we started this conversation, I think, a little bit. So Sam's question was around coaching the unknown. So when you know less than the athletes or know much on the subject. So if you're not expert, I'm looking at Craig, who's obviously been in that place. Adam obviously had massive experience paddling C1. And I suppose I reflect on my own experience working with sports that I know nothing about. Canoe slalom being an extremely good example of that. That I suppose my experience has been that I'm often have permission to ask first rather than to tell, because they know that I don't know. I guess I'm really interested to get the picture from both of you. One of you who has a lot of experience paddling themselves, and therefore people will expect that you'll give them answers, and someone who maybe came to it with less experience than that. I'm wondering, how do you go about what Sam's called coaching the unknown when you know less than them or more than them?
That's, to me, it's a really interesting question. I don't think it's like I've done C1 for a long time, and I'd say I ticked a lot of boxes for that, in terms of what I got out of it at the end of the day. Do I think if I approached it knowing nothing about C1, would it be coaching any better or worse? I'd say indifferent, I think. I don't think coaching, again, I've gone on about this quite a lot today. I think you're coaching individuals' needs rather than you going around something going, I know something better than you because I've spent more time in that class, if that makes sense. So I think, I wouldn't, for Sam to answer you directly, I'd say that you've got a load of things to play with in Scotland with different water types, gate setting, environmental changes, problem setting, etc. I think you can still coach the class using those tools as an overall coach rather than using your experience. I mean, experience is great for referencing stuff, I think, if they're self-checking it off you, and drawing it, on personal experiences that you've had. I think that is really helpful. But as a coach, you've got all the opportunity to, speak to myself, speak to other paddlers, or just quiz them until, you build your knowledge base up off them. I think there's a lot you can learn through them to upskill yourself without feeling possibly like, you don't quite know where you're taking them. And I think that probably links back to, Craig's thing about, looking at the end and then working back, what is canoe slalom, going around poles as fast as you can and getting to the, from the top to the bottom. That seems quite simple. And I think, yeah, you can make it very complicated, but do you really need to? Probably not, you know what I mean? So I think I'd explore that a little bit. Pass over to Craig.
Definitely.
Thank you, sir. Wise words. In direct answer to Sam, don't hide, front up.
Yeah.
Just embrace it. Just embrace it. I mean, I knew absolutely nothing, and I was thrown into working with people who were meddling. I share an office with a guy who was thrown straight in with the Olympic champions. And both of our learnings would suggest, just go at it. And it's really great role modeling to tell young people or whoever's in front of you, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out, and will you help me, and shall we go on this journey together? I can't underestimate how empowering that is to them and how much that'll connect you to them and them to you. I completely agree with Adam, just immerse yourself in it and discover, make mistakes, allow the paddlers to make mistakes, but focus on shaping the environment to help you learn as well as them.
Yeah.
So I'll answer two questions in one here. Like, I think when you think about coaching specific skills, I kind of like, there was a sort of, how do you coach fakies, or what is a fakie, I think. I mean, we can talk about that a little bit if we need to shortly, but I said to Adam in the precursor to the call, not that we prepared too much, because we wanted it to, role model non-linearity. I don't think the fakie was invented by someone having a specific notion of that stroke. I think it would have been, it popped out as a result of someone self-organizing around a tight sequence of gates, and trying to find a solution. And, you can, particularly when you're coaching groups of young people in Canoe, where there's so many possibilities, you don't necessarily have to go into a session with a clear plan of I am working on fakies or spins, or I think you can shape an environment that allows all sorts of possibilities and see how they problem solve. And that will educate you as much as anything along the journey. And then the skill is in the questioning and the reflection. I think that's what you can bring as a coach, and that will accelerate both of your journeys together.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I think just can't put enough emphasis on, I guess, environment setting and, exploring that with your athlete. I think it just literally, yeah. And I think Craig does that a lot from what I see day in, day out. He sets tasks orientated on the paddler's development needs, and he probably doesn't need to put much thought into, I think, the outcome. You let that naturally come to him, I think. Would you agree with that? I think, yeah.
I think so. And it can look quite, just a reinforcement, like these sessions to the untrained eye is the wrong word. If you're not familiar with this sort of setup, like, it can look pretty chaotic. And when we're in, so the Lee Valley setting, obviously we're trying to manage like up to, I think it's about 7 or 8 groups on one session. And I know that'll be a common theme for people on this call, of sharing Pinkston water or whatever. I think, don't use it as an excuse would be my advice, because I have in the past and I've regretted it. I think the creativity is available to you. I just see it as an extra challenge to me, and I need to know more. I need to learn more and get better. If I can't shape an environment under those constraints of trying to manage other people's sessions that maybe don't have the same philosophy of work, or they're working on other stuff, or and I'm happy to we could have sort of weekend retreats chatting about this stuff, let alone webinars. But happy to connect with Sam individually, as I'm sure Ads is, on how you manage the environment and course setting. I've heard this from Mark Radcliffe before, and I think he heard it from someone else. Like, course design is probably 80% of our work, in his eyes. If you get that right, you don't really have to do much more after that, other than engage the person.
So I wonder if I can just pull on that thread, and then in so doing answer some questions for people around the environment and complex and chaotic environments. And I know Jock was a teacher for many years, so he is the expert in chaotic environments in schools, I'm sure. Thinking about when we're coaching larger groups, see, Craig, appreciate that you currently have a very small group, and it's to some extent easier to manage. Obviously their expectations are higher, so it's different. So when we're coaching larger groups, and particularly when we're coaching mixed ability group, and we might have different classes and different genders and all these sort of complexity things going on, what are some of your, I guess, like guiding principles or northern stars for managing that and getting the best out of everyone when you have that? Because that is not easy, but it is the absolute reality for people coaching at pathway level and below. So I'm really interested to hear what you guys think.
Oh, go on, I'll go, Craig. Can I go, Craig?
Yeah, you go, please.
Cool.
Please.
Like my job title, I guess, is in Lee Valley is the Sovereign Talent Pathway Officer. Generally, my sessions are having minimum of 12 boats to look after, probably 15 most of the time, which is mental. And it is great for me, I think, to see,
kids deal with that, and myself a little bit as well. You definitely have to adjust to that setting. I think overriding, focal point at the end of the day is, how enjoyable are they finding it? Are they having fun? Are the learning objectives you set out for them, are they demonstrating that? If they're not, do they need to change, type thing? I think you're always continuously moving goalposts, with what you're doing. So you're in a very pliable environment or time, I think, when you're teaching the kids or large groups. But I think, creating like a positive, empowering environment for them to engage in, and not feel threatened, I guess, by the water and everything else that comes at them, type thing. I'll probably leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are definitely the aficionados in this area. I mean, I don't think I've coached more than 6 for about 12 years for sure. So practice that I see that is good, both within canoeing or I perceive to be working and without canoeing, probably comes around some general principles of developing life skills as well as slalom specific skills. So the empowerment of the learners to be engaged in having a say in the session, an active sort of role in the direction of the session or the ownership of the session, or even creating sessions themselves. I've been making a bit of a joke around various circles at the moment that I think it's become clear in this climate where we're not allowed out that coaches are the creative police. And if we're going to come back in with quite some of our old practices, we're going to get found out pretty quickly. Open the floor to them, engage them. But I think the ability in a large group is the ability to step back as a coach. It's something Doug and I describe as helicoptering. How can you design the practice that you don't get caught up in every little detail and nuance of the practice, that you're able to see patterns, to see behaviors, to go and support the young person that's struggling, to connect people together, to build relationships so they coach each other. You reflect back with them later, so you don't have to stretch yourself too thin all the time. The little touches of personal comments before they get on, when they're getting off, before they head into the changing rooms. And then beyond that, it's a question I'm always asked. Yeah, you do all this lovely stuff, Craig, but you have 3 people. And I'm completely aware how lucky I am in that space. I think were I to go back and have a much larger sort of responsibility, I would be looking at where the key influences are that impact how they arrive at the session, how they reflect when they go home. And that may be parents, it may be peers, it may be co-coaches, just how you see some lovely stuff going on with how people connect coaches down here in London, and how they try and engage parents rather than keeping them at arm's length to support practice. I don't know if that answers your question, Doug, but just some nice stuff I see both in this sport and a lot of other sports.
You had a back channel running there as you were talking. I was reminded of something that our good friend Richard Cheetham said to me, which was that we were having a great time until the coach came along. And I kind of, that sort of was in my head as you were talking there, this idea that we were having a great old time messing around, and then the coach arrived, we did something really boring, but that's what they want us to do, and then we did the thing we wanted to do after the coach left. Or maybe we should flip that around, maybe sometimes. I've got one final question, and I want to privilege the time on this because it is an absolute belter, and it's from Stuart, of course it is, just to make your lives really difficult. But it's a really nice question because it's thinking really, really blue sky. So his question was around if you guys had all the money and all the time and all the resources in the world, what would be the ultimate pathway for starting out and then winning medals in C1? So going from the full journey of the athlete, what would you have them doing when they were little? What would basically be your ideal talent development or talent program for them? There are no limits. I'll just ask you not to break any existing UK laws as you design this.
Go on, Craig, you can start with this one if you want, mate.
Sure. I'm going to give an answer you won't like, Stuart, and that's I don't know. I don't know what the ideal pathway looks like, and because I don't believe there is one. I believe there's an individual best fit that involves a lot of trial and error and a lot of reiteration and a lot of learning along the way. There are some principles that I would follow that you've heard a little bit about probably today. I heard a lovely podcast this week that does education, this is one for Jock, does education or does sport in the modern age hijack childhood? Another colleague of mine often asks the question, what's your favourite memory as a kid? And I bet it didn't involve a parent, and it probably didn't involve a coach. So no, in terms of, I mean, yeah, my coaching principles would apply. A lot of those are centered around, I guess, skills for the person as well as skills for slalom or performance or development. Starting with the end in mind, really understanding what it is. And that might not be about the race run for canoe slalom at the level you're working with, but having a real angle on what, if that is your role is slalom, then an understanding of what the race run asks of people is important, because I think part of these calls is about understanding that we all have a connectivity within the pathway to each other, and the stuff that Adam does at his level, that Jock does, that Maddie does, it's all connecting all along the way, and it's just manifestations around a theme for the person and the context. To get to the point, so I would shape an environment that's fun, that's playful, that is about exposing to self-exploration and the thrill of finding solutions to problems in many different ways at many different times. I would let them explore other sports, other disciplines when they were younger, but always under a guise of why. So one of the best things I've done in the last 3 years is communicate my why to the paddlers I work with. I think so. If you're not clear on what your why is, maybe do a little bit of work on that, because it's really empowering. Made some big differences in relationships, and be open-minded to challenge on that. So mine has changed many times along the journey. I'm clear on it now. It may change tomorrow on the back of this webinar, and that's the beauty of it. I don't believe there is any one way, Stuart. I think a variety of experiences is critical. Working towards the end in mind, coaching the person in front of you, putting a real relevance on the coach-athlete relationship would be huge. And yeah, just be really conscious of how you shape the environment, and does your session design, does your practice design reflect well enough the nature of the sport that you're ultimately trying to work them towards.
Thanks, Craig. I will, at the end of this, tell you what Remy Gaspar told me he would do, because it is it's bonkers but brilliant. So I'll share with it afterwards.
Interesting. Yeah, just Craig's nailed it really. I think is, I don't know. There's another quote that I got from one of your podcasts you sent me, Craig. Was that the only thing about the future you know is that you don't know the future type thing? I think you can't really predict what's going to produce that gold medalist at any stage. And I think, you know, it's definitely, I'd say, easier to arrive at a later age when you're fully developed in certain things to then chase that goal. To do it at talent level, I think it's incredibly hard. So you're looking at developing fun, you know, environments for people to grow, experience different things, you know, try. I think, you know, you should never be, you know, restrictive and your pathway at any level. I think, especially not at the base level. I think having opportunities to be multi-skilled, multi-disciplined, experiences out of boat as well, I think is really important. So, you know, that we're very pushy on getting people in boats, but actually, you know, there's lots of other things that I think kids, you know, should experience from a social point of view, as well as a growing up point of thing. You know, like the amount of effort I think that's gone into shaping sports clubs, you know,
schools, etc., like in what they offer physical activity wise, I think is really great. And I think, you know, all these opportunities, I think, shape people in a very positive way. So having lots of inputs that way, rather than, you know, let's go canoeing and let's do that 10 times a week, you know, for the next 20 years of my life. That, even saying that, bores me, I think. And I don't think asking a 10-year-old kid, you know, that, or a 9-year-old kid to commit to that, you know, is the right way to do things. So I think having a fun, you know, environment to develop a broad skill set and experiences with people to, you know, construct that, I think, you know, without boundary is probably the best thing you can look for in a pathway.
Awesome.
Maybe offer a personal situation that brings it to life, Doug. So I don't mind sharing this. So I guess I was fortunate enough to be supporting 3 athletes that were on the last 6 months leading into an Olympic Games. That is now a complete unknown and a vulnerable unknown for them. I guess I've pressed pause during this period and feel like making myself accountable. I need to be able to look in the mirror and go, is the work we've done and the skills and the environment we've looked to shape and develop being worthwhile, given that the future is now unknown? I.e., would we have done it anyway for life and for this sport? And I think if you can answer those questions at each stage you're working at, I think that's probably a good starting point. We can't drive everybody to the end point, because sometimes the end point's taken away as well. You get real close. But what you can do is people will leave the sport. I've had people leave the sport in my group. It's really hard hitting. I feel better equipped to deal with it now. But I reflect on, you know, one of my colleagues in para rowing once told me that his objective as a coach was that people left his program better people than when they arrived. And it's kind of something that's always stuck with me.
Thanks, guys. It'll come as no surprise to either of you who've met Remy. Remy would have encapsulated that with his idea, which was if he had all the money in the world, environmentalism aside, he would have taken the kids and their families and gone around the world having experiences paddling on water, but doing schooling and all that, and having them experience different cultures and all these sorts of things. And at the same time learning to paddle in different places around the world, which might have encapsulated some of what you guys were saying there, but it was very holistic. Obviously completely unrealistic, but very idealistic, which is nice. So that was what he came up with. I'm like really big into boundaries, and we say we're going to be an hour and a half. I think we should probably cap it disciplined at an hour and a half. If anyone's got any urgent, desperate questions or comments they want to add in, this might be a good time. I'm very happy when we stop recording this in a minute to leave the call running if you want to just have chit chat. That's not a problem. Just want to throw in a couple of things that came in here at the end there. Jock talked about the most important thing for him, for paddlers on this journey, would be having the right attitude. Let's be the right attitude along the way. And if the attitude's right, then that's the most important thing. So are there any urgent, burning questions before I take this off record, and then you can have an actual conversation?
Can I just respond to Jock there? That's a really interesting comment, Jock. Richard Cheatham once said to me something really, when he visited me, Doug and I are a mutual friend, fortunate to work with him quite regularly. In light of that, I'm conscious, like, even within the group I work with, we all have really different values. And I think he said to me once that people show you they care in different ways. And it's something that shifted my mentality on, you know, getting frustrated with some key things. Like, I think we all know what is generally conducive to performance, but, you know, for those people who struggle with punctuality or what might be perceived to be conducive values to life and sport, I think, yeah, important we take time to understand and maybe look for those things that they're showing us in different areas outside the norm.
Thanks very much, guys. Maddie's asked a question, which I'm going to let my boss answer after the call, which is the classic employee sloping shoulders, take no responsibility because I just don't know. It's a great question. I absolutely don't know.
She's not holding back on that one.
No, good on her. Quite right too. Brilliant question, and I definitely don't know the answer. So thank you all. I kind of said at the start of the call, we're all learners here. I was actually quite nervous about hosting this call because I've never done this before and didn't know what we were going to be engaged with or where we were going to go. So thank you all. Massive thanks to Craig and Adam for fielding lots of difficult questions and answering them, and thanks for the contributions from everybody. I think everybody has thrown something in it at some point. I hope you got some insights. I'd encourage you to note those down and think about what you might put into practice. Obviously, I appreciate you may now have a gap before you're able to do things applied on the water, but some of what we chatted about today, you actually probably can do online and so on. So, so please put those in action. I hope these conversations continue. The intention is to run similar sessions and podcasts over the next few weeks, so we'll keep you updated. This was Sam's learning request. Sam wanted to learn a bit more about C1. So thank you, Sam, for what's been a really, really fruitful conversation that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to say, I could get better at this and I might learn from other people. So thanks very much. Most importantly, take care over the next few weeks. Well, that's the most important thing right now until we get back to what we were doing before. And I'm going to hit stop recording now.